Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel, and I have a game today that I'm really excited to share with you, and this is BoxOff, the solo game of rectangles. And I will be the first to admit that that does not sound like the most exhilarating title, but this little unassuming puzzle game has become one of my really favorite go-to solo puzzles. Now this is designed by Stephen Meyer and published by New Venture Games, and at first glance it might be reminiscent of a certain kind of like table game you would find at a southern themed chain restaurant, but there is a lot to this little game that I have really come to enjoy. Now at the core of BoxOff, it is going to be all about removing these different colored pegs from your board here. You can see there's a number of these little drilled holes into the solid wooden board here, and you're going to start by putting all of these pegs into each of these slots. Once these pegs are all in, your goal is going to be to remove them. But how are you actually going to remove these pegs? And that's where the game of being about rectangles comes into play. Now, the way that you're actually going to remove these pegs from this board is that you're going to need to form rectangles with similar colors. So I have a couple of examples set up here just to give you an idea of how that is going to work. Now, the most simple version of a rectangle that you can form is if you have two pegs that are right next to each other. They form a very tiny rectangle between the two of them. If I see that rectangle, I can take these two off and remove them. Easy as that. Over here, these yellow pieces, you can see they're diagonal to each other, and if you draw a little rectangle or a square in this case around them, that makes your little square of two colors, and you can remove them. You can see there's a bigger option. If you have these two red pegs, you're gonna have a kind of a bigger rectangle here, and that would let you remove these. Now, if it was as simple as that, this wouldn't be much of a puzzle. So the real challenge of this game comes in what is called entanglements. And that is when you're gonna have different colors entangled within the rectangles of other colors. So if we look at these blue and green pegs here, you could see I have two blue pegs that would normally form a rectangle, but this little green peg is in the way. So somehow I need to remove this green peg first before I'm able to resolve this blue one. And lo and behold, in this perfectly world of an example I set up here, there's a green peg right here forming a rectangle with no blue interference. So I could remove those two, and that would leave me free to remove these two blue pegs. And on the face of it, it is simple as that. Set up colors, form squares, and remove pegs. Now, when you have a board full of intermingling different colors, it gets way more complicated, and you get this tightly bound knot of different colors that you're trying to diffuse. Now, let me use the power of fast forward editing and set the rest of the pegs up so I can give you a quick run through of how a game is gonna play. And so there we have it. With all of our pegs in each of these holes, we have the game all set up to get started. Like I said, the goal of this game is going to be to remove as many of these pegs as possible until you eventually run out of options to remove them, or if you remove all of them somehow. In the dozens of games that I have played, I have not successfully gotten down to 0 pegs. I've gotten down to 4, which I felt pretty good about, but no promises of how well this is gonna go. Especially when I'm recording, I'm gonna be doing things a little loosey-goosey. This is a game you can really sit and like really dive deep and see the like different permutations of how you can remove them. For the sake of recording a video, I am probably not gonna do that. I'm gonna play a little fast and loose just to give you an idea of how the game actually plays. Now, looking at the board here, it's a little overwhelming with all these colors intermingling. I will say that usually I'm not a big fan of strategy guides inside rule books, but for a game like this, I found it immensely helpful to kind of just have a couple pointers on how you may want to approach things. Now, one of the strategies that they share in the book is starting with corners. The corners are kind of where you can really get tripped up. If you have a color that is really kind of far out from its partner, it can be really tough to kind of set up these corners to remove. So I usually like to start with that, and then after that, they suggest kind of starting from the outside perimeter edges and working your way inward. And so that's what we're gonna do. We're gonna look at the board here. In the beginning, you have a bit of flexibility. So looking at my corners, the red here, I have a couple of good options to remove the red. In the blue here, I have a good clean option there. But looking at my other corners, I have a yellow that's pretty far away from any other yellows, and I have a blue that's kind of far from other blues. And so I'm gonna start my game by thinking, how can I relieve these two pressure points in my corners and kind of alleviate some of that stress we have on there. So let's look at my yellow. The closest yellow is over here. So maybe there's a way I could connect these guys. Or I could look at my blue over here. There's a blue not too far away from it. And so let's just kind of start seeing how we can start to manipulate things and hopefully free up some of our spots here. I'm already seeing some good possibilities here that I think I want to go for. So let's start with our yellow. Let's start to relieve some of these yellows. We could remove these two greens that are right next to each other, forming a teeny tiny rectangle, which is awesome. I think I want to pair it with this. You see this guy over here, this yellow? I think there's a good opportunity there. You can see there's a yellow kind of diagonal to it, but this red here has no red partners and it's kind of surrounded by yellows. And so that red probably is going to be a problem later on, but we'll have to kind of deal with it when we get to it. And so I'm going to keep going here and I'm going to try to clear a path over to this yellow. So we're gonna keep on by removing a couple of the kind of closer ones. These are all kind of easy to get rid of. And here we kind of have an example of a bigger rectangle with these two blues that are diagonal, which would form a rectangle with no interfering pieces. So we can remove these two over here. Kind of looking inwards, oh, this red here is gonna be a problem. I don't know how we're gonna alleviate this red. This is gonna be a pain in the butt. Oh, actually, no, this is pretty easy, actually. So if we remove these two yellows right next to each other, and then we could take a look at these two reds that are kind of in a straight line, that's gonna form a very long, skinny rectangle, and we can remove those guys. And then we can remove these two blues in the corner, and that's gonna leave us a really nice big rectangle here where we can remove these two yellows. So we'll go ahead and remove those. So that's gonna alleviate this whole kind of perimeter here, as well as our two corners. So that's pretty good. I'm gonna turn our attention over here to our other locked up corner, which is with this blue, which is also gonna be pretty tough to get rid of, I think. But I think I see some good options here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think I might just wanna remove all of these yellows and just clear up all those colors. Another kind of like general strategy is trying to eliminate one color. Like if you have an opportunity to totally remove a color from the field, do that, right? It's just gonna make your life that much easier of not having to worry about how am I eventually gonna get that matching piece for that specific color. So this blue here is gonna get choked up from this red. So this red is kind of the next one we gotta think about how we're gonna get rid of. The other option would be to find a piece that is like horizontal or vertical to the blue, but you could see in this long edge, there are no blues there. So we're gonna have to make some kind of rectangle with this corner blue piece here. But to do that, we're gonna have to alleviate this red piece. And so I'm looking over here, I think I see a couple options there of what we can do to get rid of this red piece here. So let's get rid of these greens that are right next to each other. I'm seeing this guy. We can remove those greens. We can remove these blues, but this green over here is gonna give us a little bit of trouble. So I'm trying to think of what else we can do to try to get rid of them. Oh man, this is a bit of a tricky one here. I think let's get rid of these reds, and then we can get rid of these yellows, which is good. And then we can get rid of these blues. And then we could get rid of these greens, but this blue is gonna be kind of our problem here, and I don't see a lot of good options on how we can get rid of it. Unless, this is usually when you get to like this part where you're like kind of halfway done, this is kind of where it starts to fall apart a little bit. But I think I see an option here. We remove these two yellows, and then these two reds, and then we can remove these two blues over here. We can remove these two blues over here, and then these blues, and then these, oop, going crazy. Start comboing stuff, you lose control. And then these two greens can get rid of each other. These two greens can get rid of each other. And then these two reds are now having a rectangle that are gonna be totally fine. So we get rid of that. And now that's gonna free up this corner piece where we can go over here and get blue and blue and relieve that piece. So that was a pretty good, that's kind of like the fun of the game there, is really like you find this like cool chain reaction where you can really feel like you see get rid of those, get rid of those, get rid of those. It's a really fun kind of like combo-y game to play. I think that's probably our last moment of glory though. I see that our options are kind of starting to run out, and I just kind of lost track of where we're supposed to be going. But I think we can get rid of these two greens that are next to each other. We can get rid of, we can get rid of these two reds. And I think that might be the end of our journey there. So this red has no partners. This yellow is locked in here. This green and this blue are locked up with each other. And so that's gonna be it. That's gonna be kind of the end of our game. We hit a roadblock there and we would have to just, shuffle them up and try again. But what do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 left over. That's like not terrible. Like I said, usually I'm able to get to like 6 to 4 pretty consistently, which is kind of like a place I'm happy with. I cannot wait to the day that I get kind of the right setup and the right way to manipulate it to actually get to 0. That'd be really fun to do. And like I said, I kind of approach this kind of loosey-goosey just for the sake of like showing an example playthrough. This is really a game where it feels like you can really spend a lot of time looking at it and seeing how things would cascade and affect with each other. But hopefully this was a helpful way just to get an idea of like some of the potential of how this all works. And if you're enjoying the video, please consider liking and subscribing to join the channel. I do a lot of different reviews and playthroughs and previews and all sorts of board game content. I'm gonna be going to Gen Con in August, which is really exciting, and I would love to have you on board. Anyway, back to our rectangle forming adventure. So when I approached BoxOff, I really wasn't sure how much I was gonna get grasped by the actual like core gameplay of this abstract puzzle where you were trying to line up these pegs and kind of like unravel this very tight ball of knots that this board game kind of just presents to you. It kind of just gives you this full board and says, good luck, figure out getting rid of how many as you can. And I don't know, there's something about this that just really, really captured me. This is a game that, in the morning, if you're having like tea or coffee, or if you're like just chilling out on a weeknight and you're listening to like a podcast or music or something, like I was constantly just grabbing this. Like it's pretty compact. It's just this little square box, and you just put the pegs in there, and then you just start pulling them off. This game can be kind of as intensive or as just like relaxed as you want it to be. There is times where I've like stared at it for like half an hour and just one game and like really mapped out the exact kind of like cascading effects of like how I would remove all of them. There's also something about this, the overall construction, the simplicity. It's just this like wooden block with a bunch of, little circles drilled into it. There's something that's very nice and like kind of tactile about like the pegs. There's a certain like just like classic game feel to it that I really enjoy. This feels like a game that you would like have in your like study or something with your Victrola, and like you'd have like a glass of scotch or something. While in my case, it is a can of seltzer listening to a podcast, it still captures that feeling of like, just like this very elegant kind of fancy feeling game. I'm not like a terribly huge fan of abstract puzzles, but I feel like the simplicity and the kind of randomized nature of this is like, oh, maybe this is gonna be the one where I'm gonna clear the board. And it really makes you feel accomplished when you're able to set up a very kind of long chain of removing pegs. It's like the satisfaction of like finding the loose piece of string in a knot and pulling it and seeing it all come apart. It kind of is filled with those like little hits of enjoyment where it's like you feel very satisfied in what you're doing with it. And so I've really, really come to enjoy it. I would say the kind of biggest negative for me in this game is the actual setup. Having to like slot all of these little pegs into the holes after every game is kind of annoying. I think the trade-off of that you get this like randomized game board every time and like the thousands and thousands of permutations you can have with the setup makes it a fair trade-off with the somewhat kind of time-consuming way that you have to plug them all in. And after you do it more and more, you get pretty good with it. But I think the actual kind of build quality and construction, they all go in and out very easily. It feels very nice to like set them in and then eventually pull them out. Very satisfying to do. It's also really easy to keep track of. The game board, as I was using it in this video, you can use it as kind of your tray to keep track of all the pieces. It comes with a couple extra little pegs. So I've already lost one of my blue pegs, but luckily there was a backup there. And just overall, I've just really come to enjoy it. Sometimes when you play so many complex, component-heavy board games, it is like almost a nice like palate cleanser to play a game that is as simple and classic and abstract as a game like this. And so overall, I'm gonna be giving BoxOff a gold Apprentice Meeple. I think for a game that is setting out to be this abstract, classic feeling puzzle, I think it just does a really, really good job. And it took me, like someone who wasn't like terribly interested in this genre of game, and I've just come to really love it. There's just something that makes you want to keep coming back to do better and better. Using it as kind of like this relaxation kind of game just to play with music or a podcast or like have a drink or something. I don't know, there's just something that this like simple wooden block calls to me that I want to keep coming back to it. And so I really enjoyed it. I think if you've ever been interested in a type of like, tactile, classic feeling puzzle, I think BoxOff is a great one to check out. New Venture has like a ton of different abstract games, so go check out their website. If you're going to like check out something like this, it seems like they really specialize in this type of game. So really cool that they're doing this. I think it is a cool like subgenre for solo games, and it's one that maybe I'd like to learn a bit more about. I'd also like to thank New Venture Games for sending a copy for review, and while they do provide the game, they have no editorial input on this video. And so thank you again for joining me in this review video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any questions about BoxOff, let me know in the comments below, and I hope to see you in the next video. Bye.